All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome in Friday episode of GC Live. I am Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. Plenty to get to here. Chris, I saw you just called it transfer portal talk. There's just you didn't even have a subject because there were too many subjects to put in there, I feel like.
Yeah.
We're going to see where this one takes us. Lots going on in Gamecock Nation. And before we get to that, though, let me tell you about our guys at CMG Home Loan, specifically my boy Clint Hammond, clinthammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. And, of course, like we always tell you, if you're in the market for a home or you think you one day are going to be in the market for a home, hit up Clint. Tell him sort of a little bit more about your situation, what you're looking to spend. Basically, he's going to take an entire look at kind of where you are financially in life, what your plans are in life, and help you come up with a plan for home ownership. He did that for me. He did that for my family. He can do the same for you. Again, 803-422-6797.
And before we get into Portal Talk, one more great sponsor to tell you about real quick, Ferry Chevrolet, ferrychevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y, Chevrolet, 803-937-4531. Been around and been in business serving the community here in the great state of South Carolina since 1926. So just like Clint in the mortgage game, if you are in the market right now or think you might be in the market here in the near future for a great new or used vehicle, all we ask, just give the folks over at Ferry Chevrolet a call or go visit their website. Again, that's ferrychevrolet.com. Check out their new and used inventory. They'll have financing options, all sorts of information on their website. Very easy to get into contact with them. Led by a fourth-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry to this day, conveniently located in Orangeburg. But again, you can check them out, ferrychevrolet.com or 803-937-4531.
All right, guys. Apologies for not – I know Jack and Kendall, I think, did a show earlier this week. Chris and I did not. But not for lack of effort, as you know, plenty of stuff going on and plenty of content on GamecockCentral.com. If you don't see our faces pop up on YouTube, just come on over to Gamecock Central. I promise you, we are always on there putting out information and interacting with you, our awesome customers. If you're not a subscriber, Chris, we still got 50% off. I don't know when this thing ends. I know it's a transfer portal deal. So quite possibly, like the portal closing at midnight, this could close soon too. So if you are not a subscriber, come check us out over on Gamecock Central. All right, let's dive into it. I don't even know where to start with this, man. There's so many different things. Commitment yesterday, commitment today, other visitors coming in. We've got the Dez Umio Zulu situation. We got the Michael Smith situation. We got situations everywhere. Let's just start where we are now and work backwards. And the most recent thing that has happened is that Christian Clark has committed to South Carolina on the hills as he's kind of finishing up a 2-day visit to Columbia. This is a guy, Chris, even though, sometimes even before a visit happens, you kind of start to hear, hey, South Carolina may be in a pretty good spot here, especially with the portal windows. Sometimes it's more, hey, they're going to have to make a move. Other times it's, hey, things look pretty good right here. Let's see what happens on the visit. And for Christian Clark, felt like the Gamecocks were in a good spot entering. They get a public commitment from him here on Friday afternoon. And, not necessarily still quite that, I guess, what would you call like that unicorn that was Rocket Sanders in terms of going out SEC ready, but SEC productive back. We're still not quite in that land. But there's the final picture of Christian Clark in a Texas uniform was him going for a $105 against Michigan with a touchdown and showing he's still got it coming off of an injury from last year and showing why there's a time where Texas, I think, really thought this guy could be a big part of their offense.
Yeah, and that Texas had last year, Wes, pretty darn good running back room. And it's interesting, there's been an absolute mass clear out of the Texas running back room. They got a couple big names in the portal. really seemed like they wanted to keep Christian Clark because they've liked him. They liked him before the 2024 season when he went down in preseason camp with the injury. Obviously didn't play that season. Didn't play as much this year because he had some older, more experienced and very talented, frankly, guys in front of him. Still a younger guy, right? So he's someone that, that bowl game, 20-something carries, 105 yards, a touchdown that you referenced, that was his biggest game of his college career. But Wes, it was also his biggest opportunity to date, right? So you're 100% right. You're not getting a guy who, oh, this guy rushed for 1,000 yards in the SEC or the Big Ten, or, even at a lower level, that production's not proven either. But you do see this guy's a former 4-star guy who Texas liked and signed out of high school, had a really nice offer list. You see what he did in the bowl game. You hear some things out of Texas about how much they liked him. And you put him in this running back room and say, hey, this is a guy that might have every opportunity. He will get every opportunity. But if you're kind of trying to project it out, you could see this maybe being the guy who ends up getting the most carries in that room. You never know. Right now, Wes, we'll see. Portal's not closed. We're sitting here 225 on Friday. South Carolina's added, some pieces through the portal, 3 now. They've retained some guys off the roster. There's not that one guy that you can point to and say that will be the guy, but are there some candidates? For sure. And Christian Clark, I think very interesting back, can bounce it outside, runs with some toughness, some vision. Really like this pickup, and South Carolina moved quickly when he got in the portal to get it done.
Yeah, they did. And, I think you look at that running back room, man, it does look completely different now than it did, when Stan Drayton took over. And, I kind of like some of the other additions as well. I like the fact that you're getting a Matt Fuller back. That's somebody South Carolina has been high on. You have now with Christian Clark and Jabri Wallace-Coleman, these are 2 former 4-star high school guys in terms of top 25 prospects at their position in the country out of high school. Kind of similar in that neither has had that opportunity to really do it much at this level yet and show what they can do. Christian Clark, a little bit more of a resume there, like we just talked about. Still not a huge resume, but you can at least see the vision of what that would look like at this level. And so you bring those guys in to fight it out with the players that are already on campus. And then you also, added and not that you ever count anybody out. I think everybody's going to have a chance to compete, but at least at this early point, you look at adding a Sam Williams-Dixon from Ohio State, a little bit more kind of probably as a depth guy early on in his career at South Carolina. Whereas I look at both these pickups from Penn State and Texas as, you watch the film and you're like, all right, those guys can help you if you're South Carolina. Those guys can add not just depth, but potentially, I always look at running backs. Can you get into that top 2? Those are the guys that are going to play. If you're a 1 or a 2 in the RB room, you're going to play. And so what does that mean for you? What does that mean for that group? It's just, I look at it also, Chris, as now Drayton quickly putting his stamp on that group. A couple of guys, especially with Coleman, someone that he's very familiar with, I think, and probably a little bit of an eval advantage in that you were able to watch him for an entire year in practice and in scrimmages and in knowing what you were getting there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, this is a guy that he didn't just even recruit him during the high school recruiting process and he went somewhere else and he just has some familiarity. There's a big time familiarity in that. Recruited him at Penn State, gets him there. Yeah, Wallace Coleman didn't factor in terms of playing on the field, but this is a kid you're in the meeting room with every day. You know what he's about. You're seeing him practice. Jabri Coleman, West, at one point was committed to Georgia during the process. They do a pretty good job, last I checked, of recruiting running backs there. So a kid with a lot of promise, I think. And, you kind of look at this room. South Carolina wanted to fill out the numbers here, increase the depth, increase the competition. The only, and I don't want to call it a negative, I think we all wondered, would South Carolina go out and get that kind of proven power 4 number 1? They didn't, right? But the direction they went was going out and getting some guys who have a lot of potential, players who, and you mentioned them all, Coleman, Fuller from the current roster, I think hits that. Christian Clark certainly qualifies. Guys that just haven't gotten as many opportunities that will now have the opportunity to take what they've got at South Carolina, take that situation and really run with it. And I think these guys do have ability, so that room is now West shaping up to potentially be one of the most competitive ones on the roster. I think there's going to be a lot of that this season, which you could expect when you have this many portal entries, portal acquisitions for South Carolina. You're adding a lot of new guys into the mix, and 3 of them are in that running back room. So I also like that you're getting you're kind of staggering this portal class, right? You got Williams Dixon, who spent 2 years at Ohio State, I think, 2 or 3. You've got Coleman. You've got Christian Clark, who's been in college for 2 years, has only played for 1. And so you're kind of staggering the experience levels. Coleman, Wes, is basically just like getting a big-time freshman for all intents and purposes. We all know South Carolina didn't sign a high school back. It's been talked about a lot here in Columbia for the past 2 cycles. Well, to me, man, you can just kind of mark that off and say Jabri Coleman is basically a high school acquisition with the check mark of he's already been in a college program because he's got a full slate, 4 years of eligibility.
Well, and you can look at Christian Clark as being your high school acquisition from the class prior to that,
Yeah.
I guess, if I'm thinking of that correctly. And then, you certainly hope, if you're South Carolina, that you're going to be adding some freshmen, some actual freshmen looking ahead. This class of 2027, a few guys in the state of South Carolina that are highly regarded at that position and a couple that have offers from South Carolina. And so we'll see where that goes, man. But certainly a different vibe in that room right now. And there's a reason why Shane Beamer wanted to go out and make a change at RB coach as well. So I think we'll all sort of be interested to see how Stan Drayton continues to shape that room. Let's tie together 2 of the more, I would say, layered situations with South Carolina right now, like not necessarily completely black and white. A guy commits, a guy doesn't commit. It's news, but it's all right. It is what it is. There is some nuance to a couple of these situations. And, Chris, we've seen some nuance for this cycle to several South Carolina transfer portal entries. You had, of course, Josiah Thompson goes in the portal, decides later to come back and, does so. You have a brief moment where Julius Solomon is going to enter the portal. He never, I guess, technically entered, but had decided to change his mind, doesn't leave. And now with, and we'll get into the commitment from yesterday as well, with the commitment of Kalen Herring from Tennessee, very, very quickly after that, you have a situation where South Carolina loses Dez Umio Zulu, who tells, Hayes Fawcett, hey, put it out. I'm going in the portal. So then late last night, early this morning, we find out, hey, South Carolina is going to enforce that contract. And that is another aspect. There's another layer to all of this that, we saw it with the Washington quarterback. We've seen it with some other schools. How much are the schools able to enforce these contracts? When do they decide to enforce them? When do they not? And then, Chris, even what does that actually mean? And so the valid question becomes, does that mean a guy just is not going to leave? Or does that mean there are some damages to be paid out for the kid leaving? And, I think in the case of Dez, maybe early on it could have gone one of 2 ways. Certainly today, as the day has gone on, we can say still definitively South Carolina plans to enforce that contract. Right now, it appears that will be in terms of like wherever he ends up paying a buyout essentially to South Carolina. I never say never in any of these things, Chris, but we're in agreement basically from what we've heard. I think it'd be a big change up now if Dez was back in Columbia. Like, seems like they are making their plans in order to fill that spot probably as we speak.
And I think you look at the timing of it too, Wes. Of course, guys can still find new homes, probably not for long after the portal window closes today. And the reason I say not for long, you know, there are still academics in play. You still got to enroll guys in school, even though we're sitting here talking about contracts and buyouts. I mean, it's a strange kind of dynamic and world that we're in right now. Depending on the academic calendar of whatever school, a guy may go to. But the timing of this thing, look, when did it happen? Late Thursday night. If this was something that maybe had been kind of an ongoing conversation of a player thinking about going in the portal, it kind of floats around, there's behind the scenes conversations. Maybe it works out. Maybe it becomes one of those nuanced situations. But from our understanding, Wes, as it ended up, kind of came out of nowhere. And then at that point, if you're South Carolina, you don't really have time or the inclination to go try to work on this and see what can be done. At this point, all the signs point to South Carolina moving on. And it looks like, from what we've been told, actively engaged trying to find potential replacements in the portal. Of course, there's not a lot of time there. There's a lot of guys in there. There's still an opportunity to take more visits today, this weekend. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, we're same page there, man. Looks like that situation's over. Came on late, came on suddenly, but that's where it's at.
A situation that I wouldn't say is related in any way in terms of like how it's played out, but sort of gets tied in because there are similar aspects at play, right? That would be of Michael Smith, who basically wanted to redshirt middle of the season. Basically is told, all right, if you want to redshirt when you've been playing, you can't do that here. You're not on the roster anymore. Then there's discussions. There's talk about him coming back. He enters the portal anyway. He commits to Syracuse. Signs with Syracuse, which is maybe the most important sentence in any of this.
Yes.
Then wants to come back to South Carolina. And much like South Carolina at the time with Dez, at the time Syracuse is going to say, hey, you signed a contract, man. Like, we have to enforce this. And Chris, I know you put the latest on our front page in an article here, I don't know, hour or two ago at this point. It's Friday afternoon. But a somewhat complicated situation that I think we had to be careful not to say anything definitively because things can change. And then people would say, well, you were wrong by saying that. Things can change. But I don't know how to put this, man. I wouldn't be penciling Michael Smith into my future South Carolina depth chart at this point. Still, even with the discussions, between him and Carolina and all that happening, I guess.
Yeah, and if you go on social media and log on, you might still see some posts, saying, "Oh, well, Michael Smith's back. This is going to be great." First of all, it's not to that level, and has not been. That's just a fact. He's not. Nobody could accurately report he is rejoining the team, and that's done. And to be fair, nobody has reported that, other than maybe some social media speculation. But Wes, I would say not only is it, not to that point, but from what we have gathered, it actually seems pretty unlikely at this point, just because, like you said, that's a complex, nuanced situation. We do have a full update up on Gamecock Central if you want to go check it out and get maybe a little bit more depth on it. But I think maybe the best way to put it, a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of difficulties, a lot of complexities, a lot of complications there. To where if you kind of add it all up, according to what we've heard as we've been working on this story today, it doesn't make it seem very likely that he'll be back 2026. Now, is he going to play for Syracuse? Is he going to play for someone else? I couldn't say that. I have no doubts that Michael Smith would like to come back to South Carolina. I don't even doubt that South Carolina has been open to that possibility happening of him coming back. But again, just with this, crazy world we live in, buyouts and contracts and rev share and all these different moving parts, it's tough, especially this late in the game, to try to get that sorted out.
Yeah, and I've said this about South Carolina and Dez. I'll say it about Syracuse and Mike. I can't really blame schools who are, the players earn their money, or whatever. The market is there. The schools are giving out a lot of money, so I can't fault them for protecting their interests and trying to do what they're there for. If you're in the football program, if you are a leader of the football program, yes, you're trying to develop young men. You're trying to grow them for life. You also are trying to win games, right? You're trying to everybody's in the add players and retain players game. So if the contracts are going to be year to year and a player signs a contract for that year, unless there's some crazy circumstances, like extenuating circumstances, it kind of is what it is. And the guys are treated like professionals now. They are paid like professionals. And unfortunately, this is a situation where, contracts are a part of professional life in just about every way. And you can break a contract, but there are also typically some damages to doing so.
There's also, Wes, like in a pro sports model, the NFL, for example, best example because it's football and we're talking about college football. This type of thing couldn't happen, right? Like you couldn't sign your free agent deal with a team and then, go a period of a few days or a few months and then some other team can offer you a deal, or you just go say, actually, coach, I want to leave. That doesn't happen, right? But why? There is a structure that both sides in the NFL, being the players, the NFLPA, and the owners of the league, the NFL, they've all agreed. This is going to be our structure. We're going to have, here's our salary cap. You can't use outside NIL to influence. That can't be part of your payments. That all has to be proven and buttoned up. There's going to be contracts. There's going to be a free agency period. There's going to be a draft. There's going to be trades only in this window. If there's tampering, which we've seen in pro sports some, there's going to be actual penalties that can actually be enforced, right? And so a lot of people in college sports have ideas, frankly, a lot of very good ideas that come out. We need to have a true cap, or we need to have this, or we only need to have the portal window in this time, and they shouldn't be able to do this or that. True. A lot of very good ideas. Problem is no structure to do it in, right? Everything's just being done as we go, figuring out, building the plane while it flies, whatever analogy you want to use, and being done through the courts. So this is kind of how it's going to be until that gets fixed.
Yeah, and I do think, man, it is unfortunate because clearly Mike Smith wants to be at South Carolina, and I mean, dude, we've talked up Mike on this show since before he committed. Like, I was sitting there going, when South Carolina was having to go in the portal and get a tight end, I was going, I tell you which portal tight end I would think would be a great fit for South Carolina and Kendall Briles' offense.
Yeah,
Mike Smith. Like, I've been high on this guy for a long time. Didn't quite come together last season the way I thought it would for him and for the offense, obviously. New, fresh start. Like, it would have been really, really good for him and for everybody, I think. But unfortunately, it sounds like, unless it takes a complete 180, it sounds like may end up being like one of those difficult life lessons, especially about like once you sign stuff, it's, people are going to hold you to it when there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars involved in it. So anyway, that's the latest there as of Friday afternoon on those two. Just probably more complex than we're used to looking and thinking about when it comes to college football roster maintenance and kind of what that looks like, man. Let's dive a little bit more into actual football and talk about the addition of Caleb Herring, who really kind of emerged in the last few days. There was that so you had a dead period Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think, Chris, everybody used that window as an opportunity to take their breath. Maybe not so from a sense of like taking a break, but more like, let's take a breath, let's reset. Let's see where we think our needs are. Let's make sure we're where we need to be at this point. What are the remaining needs? What are the remaining targets? Who do we want to bring in? Caleb Herring really kind of emerged at that point, at least publicly, in terms of, hey, this is a guy we're going to track now for South Carolina. At the time of his commitment, he was the number 3 available edge. So among the edges that haven't committed or signed anywhere else, the 3rd highest ranked guy that was still available at that position. And I think someone that, quite frankly, Chris, South Carolina is selling him on the Kyle Kennard route. Come in, play a bigger role. Let's be more productive. You've got quite a bit of natural ability, maybe some untapped upside. And guess what? We got this guy number 6 on the other side who is going to eat up a lot of attention from offensive coordinators.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison with Kennard. And, Kyle, before he got to South Carolina, had maybe kind of quietly had a pretty good year at Georgia Tech. He had 7 sacks that year. Wes, 4 of those were in one game, I think, against Wake Forest. And so you're sitting there going, all right, this Kyle Kennard kid wasn't a big-time, high school recruit. He was a 3-star guy. But you looked at him and you said, okay, he's got size. I don't care what the competition level is or who it is. If you have 4 sacks in a game, you got something to you, right? I don't know that anybody envisioned Kyle Kennard coming here and winning the Nagurski, right? But that is what happened, to his credit and to the staff's credit. You have a guy in Caleb Herring that was a big-time recruit, former number 1 prospect in the state of Tennessee. I think his junior or senior year of high school had 24 tackles for loss. Also has, you look at him physically, really, really good size. And the production, he hasn't had that big year yet. 4 sacks last year. 2 of them came against Georgia, 2 against Mississippi State. Did play a good bit. Hasn't had that wow production yet. But when you watch him, you see the size. You see the flashes of, frankly, some dominance at times. You see the first step that he has as a pass rusher. And you go, okay, this guy's still got some untapped potential. And if he can get there, this is basically, Wes, also, it's a contract year for Caleb Herring. If he goes out, balls out this year, wins the postseason awards, this is his year to really max out his stock. So you might be kind of creating a really nice marriage. And you mentioned getting to play opposite of number 6. I'm sure Dylan Stewart's excited about getting somebody else in this room opposite of him as well. Could end up being a good match for South Carolina.
Yeah, and Chris, we'll see what happens now with Dez U pretty much out. As we talked about, you're looking at probably, if you can, you're trying to add another guy to that room. So we can't completely speak on that room yet and what it's going to look like, but I think you can really kind of, as much as you can do so in a January when a football season doesn't start, until September, you can sort of go ahead and if you're penciling in a starting lineup, I think you're penciling Herring in to that spot opposite of Dylan. And I think, dude, it just takes some pressure off of the young guys, takes some pressure off of George Wilson's recovery. That, people are going to forget about George. South Carolina liked what they had seen from George Wilson before he got hurt, but you don't want to be relying on that, right? And the talk was, hey, George is going to help South Carolina this past season, maybe more of a situational role before he got hurt. You got a couple of young guys on the roster that played a little bit last year but didn't play a ton. You got Julian Walker coming in, who I think a lot of people are excited about, but you don't want to be like, hey, we need to compete for the playoff this year. True freshman, go in there and play defensive end. That's just not a great recipe for success. And then another fascinating aspect, man, you got Kelby Collins, who, as we've talked about, can play edge or can play inside. Do we see a role for him where he's playing edge on early downs and sliding inside on pass rush downs? I could see that happening. So you're kind of starting to get a feel for what that room is, but certainly I also think, Chris, from what I've heard, just the fact he has done what he's done against SEC opponents, against SEC offensive tackles, you're not having to project that part anyway. And not, I'm not going to paint a picture. It's not like he's coming in with 12 sacks in a year
Yes.
either.
Yes.
But there absolutely, he looks like your prototypical SEC edge pass rush guy. Very a canvas here where there's some upside, but there is some production and there's definitely some experience at the SEC level for him. And again, somebody South Carolina excited to have. I do want to throw this out, man, because I've seen this mentioned on social media, and I kind of feel like we need to help put it into it. I mean, you can be, this is going back to Dez Umio real quick. You can be ticked off at Sterling Luke. Like, you can be mad he left. You can be mad that he left like pretty quickly. Seemed to have kind of made up his mind. But I know people have like connected the dots. Hey, Sterling Lucas was in town. Then Dez hits the portal. I mean, I haven't heard anything at all other than like that coincidence. He was here to see Jaden Bryant, who's the Irmo edge that is committed to LSU. I haven't heard anything to link those two things. And Alabama is the school that is currently linked behind the scenes to Dez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not LSU. So
yeah. Maybe something comes out later. LSU's interested. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but
you can never say anything for sure.
Yeah, you never say anything for sure. But yeah.
But I just it sure, and we even ran that by, like, we were kind of like, hey, could this be something there? From what we've heard, doesn't appear to be. So we shall see. Robert says, going back to Mike Smith, he could go to play at Syracuse for a year and then hit the portal again. Yeah, he absolutely could. Absolutely could. Or he goes to Syracuse, has a good time, has a good experience, gets the football, and he's happy. You don't know. You don't know. I did think that was kind of I thought that was a very good get for Syracuse, honestly, when they got Mike. So we'll see where all of that ends up, man. Let's see. Do we have any ad reads right now, Chris? I don't think we do. You know what, man? I want to make sure we're caught up. We got a moment here. Let's throw some love at our guy Andy Luedecke, My Perfect Franchise, myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net is the email address, whatever your preferred way to contact him. Andy doesn't care as long as you contact him about business ownership and franchising a business. He essentially will take your information, kind of where you are in life, and if you're looking to kind of leave the corporate rat race, pursue the American dream, if you're looking for a side hustle while you're working your current job, or you're just trying to get out of your current job completely as you diversify, build wealth, leave a legacy, Andy is a franchise consultant and franchise owner. He will help people like you find franchises that will fit your skill set, your financial requirements and needs, your time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free. If you have any questions about business ownership, hit up Andy today, 404-973-9901. Shout out to Andy. He's a big baseball fan, I think. So he'll be excited. College baseball getting rolling here fairly soon. South Carolina started practice for baseball. South Carolina started practice for softball. Gamecocks, I think, Chris, I saw today, one of the rankings for softball, number 16 preseason in the country. So shout out to Ashley Chastain Woodard and our friends over there in that program. They're starting off the year in a much different place than they did last year, huh?
Yeah, no doubt. They're on the radar, I think you could say, going into this year after year one that they had.
Yeah, no doubt, man. All right, hey, let's close out a little bit more portal talk, Chris, before we get off here. And again, I want to remind everybody, come hang out with us on Gamecock Central if there are things happening over the weekend, which there will be, guys on campus again, that additional edge guy will be sort of, I would say, gathering information on that, hopefully reporting some stuff on that. And somebody I've got to check on here, Chris, Talek Laquette, Texas State guard, probably on campus already, should be on campus at some point today, and is doing a 2-day visit to South Carolina. Is one of those guys that, is on the radar, is on the watch list. The Bucknell kid, offensive lineman, is supposed to be in on Sunday. He's somebody to keep an eye on. From what I've heard there, with the Bucknell kid, I think South Carolina would have some ground to make up in terms of where they are with him. It certainly felt like going into these other visits, Caleb Herring and Christian Clark, that South Carolina was in a great spot with Clark, and we saw them, of course, land him. And they were in an okay spot with Herring, though the reporting was that Miami had kind of set the pace, and they made a move there as well. So I think, dude, we've seen South Carolina be pretty aggressive when they get the guys they want on campus, and it becomes time to kind of work everything out. They've been pretty aggressive in going out and landing the guys they want. So I'll be curious to see these final slots in this class. What does that look like? And then I think people need to have some realistic expectations as well. If some names pop up and maybe you go bio searching, what has this guy done? If at any point in your mind you go, that doesn't make a lot of sense, what's going on with that? Remember, this is not old school recruiting. You can't just stack talent. You can't just you're having to fill out roles, right? So there may be some guys that get added to this thing that end up being, the kids themselves, they're going to come in and they're going to compete and they're going to do everything they can to make that evaluation be wrong, right? But there will probably be some guys where the evaluation is, this is someone who can help our team, but help our team in a reserve type role.
Yes. People love to talk about how difficult it is, and it's absolutely true, to have depth nowadays on your team, right? Well, what is part of having depth? Is having guys beyond your starters and your guys that are playing huge roles. Frankly, it is really hard to get that because high school recruiting is still very important. But when you bring in high school kids, you have to try to keep them and keep them engaged in your program so they don't hit the portal. You're having to go get guys out of the transfer portal on a yearly basis. A lot of those maybe are going to be in their final year, so you're turning that over every year. And your transfer guys that you bring in, the high-level ones, Wes, they want to come in and play. And so if you're going to sign, let's just say, I don't think South Carolina will get to 25 kids in the portal. What are they at right now? Maybe they will. Let's just say
Christian would be 19.
19. So maybe not 25, but maybe pretty close. Let's just call it 25 for the purposes of this example. Not all 25 of those guys is that kid's a starter. Some of them are going to be co-starter types. Some of them are going to be depth pieces. Some of the guys are going to be guys that maybe they just come in and play some special teams for you, play some snaps here and there. There's nothing wrong with taking those types of guys. There's also, Wes, the other thing, you're exactly right. This isn't traditional recruiting, especially with NIL. There's a budget to all this, right? And if you need evidence that South Carolina is invested in this portal class, go look at the volume of guys they've gotten, the positions they've signed, and some of the recruiting battles that they've won that have been against some big name brand programs. Caleb Herring, great example. You just mentioned earlier, Miami, Texas. The Gamecocks went out in that battle. Jacarius Peak, had a bunch of offers. That's another one. There's going to be some guys that are added in, and you're not necessarily looking at them going, all right, that's your starter, right? You might be adding some depth pieces, and it's totally fine to use the portal to do that too.
Yeah, no doubt. You got anything else, man, or you want to close it here?
Yeah, we can close it out. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to go through Man, so much happened between our last show and this one. Like most of the recruiting class for the portal, we're going to have to go through and do like a deep dive or some multi-part deep dives. We'll talk about that and figure it out. But we will be back at some point and do like a complete, like, here is exactly what happened during the portal. We'll have to do that sometime.
Yeah, I'd like to just do a full, the recruiting class. We did a breakdown for every single kid that signed. I'd like to do the same for the portal class. And also I think last year was in between the schedules were different. It was in between signing day and portal. We had South Carolina Director of Player Personnel, Darren Usher, on. We're going to effort that again to get Darren on, talk about a lot of the high school signings are already on campus now. Talk about some of those guys, talk about this class. And I think we need a Charles Power sighting here soon. Charles has been all over the world at Shrine Bowl practices, then at multiple national all-star game practices where South Carolina, now freshman early enrollees, were competing, and would love to get Charles to talk about that, man. So be on the lookout for all that. Hopefully here soon. We'll try to effort that maybe for next week. But come to Gamecock Central right now. Still, if you're not on there, annual subscription, 50% off. Come join us and get all the scoop that is directly reported on Gamecock Central. And come enjoy our community on the Insiders Forum as well. So awesome. Appreciate y'all. He is Chris. I am Wes. We're going to hop off here, but we'll see y'all very, very soon.